What's up guys, it's James Allen, the Out-of-State Investor, and in today's video, we're gonna take a look at Helocs, we're gonna take a look at cash out refinances, and I'm gonna tell you the best way to go if you're looking to pull money out of your primary residence or even your investment property. Now, I've done both of these things multiple times, and I can tell you from personal experience that there are pros and cons to each method. But before I break all that down, do me a favor and support the channel by smashing that like button. And if it's your first time visiting the channel, I buy rental properties and flip houses both in and out of my state, and I teach you guys how you can build massive wealth doing the same thing, as well as how you can improve your personal financial situation. So if any of that sounds interesting, definitely subscribe, hit that notification bell, and with that said, let's jump into it. So before we even get started talking about what is the best way to go, let's first go over exactly what each one is. A cash out refinance is basically replacing your old mortgage with a brand new one, and because you've built up your equity over time, you have a surplus of equity and you have the option to cash out refinance. So that means you're pulling cash out of the house that you bought. Now, a Heloc is a little bit different. It stands for a home equity line of credit, and it's essentially like using a credit card with your house being used as collateral. So essentially, it's just this credit line that allows you to pull money out, put it back in as you please. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility than you get with a mortgage. So now that you know what a Heloc is and what a cash out refinance is, you're probably wondering, okay, we get it, but which one is better? Well, the answer is, it depends, okay? It's gonna depend on your own individual situation, how you're utilizing the funds, things like that. So let me give you a breakdown side by side. I'll give you the cash out refinance, the Heloc, and you can see the pros and cons of each, which is going to be better for which kind of situation, so that you have a clear picture of if you want to use a Heloc or a cash out refinance. Okay, so the first major difference I want to talk about is resetting the clock versus leaving your mortgage alone. Okay, so for a cash out refinance, you're essentially replacing your old mortgage with a new one, which means that what you're going to do is you're going to pay off that old mortgage. That mortgage is gone, and now you've replaced it with a brand new one, which means that if you were already 15 years in or 20 years into paying your mortgage payments, you're back to square one again, where you're paying mostly interest first. Because if you're aware of how mortgages work, the way they work is it's mostly interest in the beginning, and it's not till you get really in that second half of your mortgage payments that you really start tackling that principal pay down. So that's one thing you're going to want to consider, is that you may not want to start back at square one again if you're already so far into your mortgage. Now, with that said, this is where a Heloc can come into play. So with a Heloc, you don't end up actually replacing your old mortgage, which is great news if you have 15 years, 20 years already paid off, and so you can manage to keep that in place, and you would do what's sort of like a second position mortgage, or really what they call a second position lien. And what that means is essentially, in the order of operations, if you were to default on your loan for whatever reason, you would pay the bank that gave you your mortgage first, and second in line on that would be the people who gave you your Heloc. So as you can see, if you're already really far down the road on your mortgage payments and you're paying mostly principal at this point, that could be one reason to consider doing a Heloc instead of a cash out refinance. Now, the next major difference between a cash out refinance and a Heloc is with a cash out refinance, you actually get the whole amount of the loan in one go, which means that from day one, you're paying interest on the total amount. Whereas with a Heloc, you actually don't do that. What happens is you'll get a Heloc and you won't pay a dime of interest until you actually pull any money out. So when you have your Heloc, let's say it's $100,000, you pull out $10,000, you're only going to pay interest on the $10,000, not the total $100,000. Now, in most cases, we probably just want the money all at once, but I see the major benefit to a Heloc in this situation is if I'm doing transactional types of deals. So if I'm doing flips or I'm doing BRRRR deals, I essentially want to put my money back in when I'm not using it. I pull it out when I need to do another deal. That can be a really handy thing to use for those kind of things, whereas a cash out refinance, I would be paying the full whack 24/7 on that. All right, so the next major difference between a cash out refinance and a Heloc is the cash out refinance is actually a fixed interest rate, which means whatever you get, say you get a 3% interest rate, in 30 years, that's not going to change from a 3% interest rate. It's going to be a 3% interest rate today, and it's going to be a 3% interest rate in 20 years from now. Now, Helocs are a completely different story because Helocs have variable interest rates. So variable interest rates move with the market. Basically, whatever the Fed interest rate is, it kind of moves with that, and they oftentimes charge prime plus 1 is what they'll call it, or prime plus 2 depending on the banks you're working with. And so you have the potential to maybe start out with a 3% rate, which sounds good in the beginning, but it could move up to a 4%, 5%, 9% interest rate. So if you're not careful, you could be left holding the bag. Another thing to consider is a cash out refinance will generally have lower interest rates than what a HELOC would be at. So that in general, I have to give the nod to a cash out refinance once again. But when it comes to closing costs, that's where things are a lot different, because cash out refinances can cost you thousands and thousands of dollars in order to do it. You may not pay out of pocket, but you'll pay in your equity. So eventually if you sell the home or you want to refi again, you will lose the amount of money you can either get back in your pocket from the sale or the refinance the next time around. So either way, you end up spending thousands of dollars with the refinance, whereas with a HELOC, you can avoid most of the closing costs that you're going to come across, such as loan origination fees and things like that. But you are going to still have to pay for things like your title and document fees, and you're going to have to pay for like your appraisal. So overall, you'll still come out of pocket maybe a few $100, but it's a few $100 versus thousands and thousands of dollars. Loan to value is another major difference that you're going to find between a HELOC and a cash out refinance. And what you'll find in general is that with a HELOC, you're able to get a much higher loan to value than what you can get with a cash out refinance. So on the investment side, what I found with, let's say, a single family is on a cash out refinance, you can go up to a 75% loan to value. On a duplex, up to a fourplex, you can go up to 70% loan to value. Whereas with a HELOC, you can actually go up to 80% is the best I've found for loan to value. Now for primary residences on a cash out refinance, the best you can do for a single family is 80% loan to value. Whereas with a HELOC on a primary residence, I've seen loans going up to 90, 95%, sometimes even 100% loan to value, although they will start to charge a much higher rate of interest than what they normally charge for the lower 80%, 85% loan to value. But if you're looking to maximize your dollars as much as you can to maybe use it for more investments or things like that, then getting a HELOC that goes 90%, 95% could be a great way to give you money to work with that you can use towards more investments. Now the final major difference between a cash out refinance and a HELOC is that the HELOC funds can actually be frozen. If the market takes a turn for the worse, the banks have been known to freeze the funds of the HELOC. Now it doesn't mean that they're going to call you back on your money and that you have to pay the bank back what you've already pulled out. What it means is that you can keep what you pulled out, but what you haven't pulled out, those funds could get frozen. Whereas with a cash out refinance, you've already received all your money, so there's really nothing for them to freeze, so you don't have that same problem that you have with a HELOC. So these are the major differences between a cash out refinance and a HELOC, but I still want to give you some real life examples so you could see how I thought about whether I want to use a HELOC or whether I want to use a cash out refi. Now I recently did a cash out refinance on a duplex of mine, and the reason I chose to do a cash out refinance is because I currently had a 5.7% interest rate locked in on that duplex, which compared to today of what I could get on an investment property, it was a lot higher. And so I was able to lock in an interest rate in the 3s, which made my cash flow a lot better. And I was still able to get cash out of the property because there was enough built-in equity. So I decided that I'd rather get a fixed interest rate than a variable interest rate, and I would be willing to give up that extra money I could pull out just for that safety and security, and also lowering my monthly payments altogether. Now for my triplex, I ended up getting a HELOC instead of a cash out refinance. And the reason for that is that I actually had a pretty good interest rate already locked in. So getting that lower interest rate really wouldn't make the difference for me. And so I wanted to get a HELOC instead, because by getting a HELOC, I could tap into 80% loan to value instead of 70% loan to value. Plus I could avoid paying $8,000 or so in closing costs, which means that all that money I also get to use in my HELOC as well. So it ended up giving me tens of thousands of dollars more to work with that I could use for other investment properties. So overall, I would say that HELOCs are perfect to use for transactional funding. Things like if you're trying to use them for flips, if you're trying to use them for BRRRR strategy, things that you're going to pull it out, you can pay it back, things of that nature. And in addition to that, it could be very useful if you already have a great interest rate locked in, or if you just want to tap into more equity. But overall, you really want to try to keep a HELOC towards transactional funding. Now on the flip side, the cash out refinance can definitely be a safer way to go, because on one hand, you can lower your monthly payments, but you can also do it for the long run because you have that fixed interest rate over a 30-year period. So with that said, if you did enjoy today's video and you felt like you gained some value from it, do me a favor and smash that like button. And also, if you haven't already done so, definitely subscribe subscribe and hit that notification bell for more videos like this. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and you can even ask me questions if you're kind of struggling with this and trying to figure out if you want to use a Heloc or a cash out refinance, and I'll do my best to answer. Finally, follow me on Instagram at the Out of State Investor. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.